Welcome to this course on AI/ML in Materials Engineering, and today's lecture is lecture number 20. For the last 3-4 lectures, we have been learning about different types of machine learning algorithms. First, I am talking about supervised learning, and as a part of supervised learning, what we have done? As a part of supervised learning, we have already done, first we have decided regression. Remember that regression, different types of regression. Then we talked about classification problem. Classification is very important in machine learning. As a part of classification, we have discussed decision tree. Then we discussed, in the last lecture, discussed SVM, support vector machine, and today we will discuss artificial neural network, and we will see how things will move on. So, these are actually supervised learning. There are a whole set of techniques which are known as unsupervised learning. So, obviously, that also will take some time. So, let us see what we have learned. So, as you know, classifications, as we discussed, I categorize two categories, binary and multi classifications, and I do not want to go back in details of that. These are basically basis on which one can classify things into either one of the two classes or one of the several classes of categories, and there are different reasons why you use that. There are different set of problems, and remember, material science problems will be not binary, it will be multi class problems, and you can also have multi-level problems also. The difference between multi-class and multi-level, multi-class means you have several classes or categories, okay? Like here we have truck, plane or boat, that is very simple. But when a multi-level categories means we try to predict 1 or 0 or more classes for each input variables examples, and there is no mutual exclusion because of the input examples can have more than one level. Remember, more than one level, it is not more than one class, it is more than one level, and that is why this is different from the multi-class, and this has been observed in different domains. Like natural language processing is a very important one, what is known as NLP properly. We will discuss about NLP sometime later, but that is one of the techniques in which you can have a different topics in one given text or one sentence. You can have different topics, right? Each word can be talking about different aspects. So, similarly, if we are talking about computer vision, which also we are going to discuss in later part of this course, an image can contain multiple objects. Like here, you have an image contains truck, boat, plane and a dog. So, how to classify each of these form one single image? It is, remember, it is not separate images for truck, boat, plane or dog. One image you have everything, and from that image you have to classify each of these objects. So, that is why algorithms has to be very robust and very clear. The most algorithm used for standard classification can be taken into specialized patterns of multi-level classifications. So, decision tree, what we have discussed about it, that can be again used for multi-level classification problem also. So, as I said, we have discussed about regression, decision tree, and we will discuss about SVM. Today we are going to discuss about NN, and furthermore we have to discuss some of these techniques like naive Bayes and random forest and KNN also. So, in a classification problem, these are very critical things, that is what I am telling you again and again. There are two steps, it is a 2 steps process. First, you have to develop a model. Model means basically algorithm, right? So, these are the different algorithms we always discuss. So, in a model construction, first thing in a machine learning is training or learning, and that is why you have to describe a set of predetermined classes, and each sample will be assumed or instances will be assumed to belong to a very clearly predetermined class, and that is defined by the class attributes. Let us say you have a picture which contains all kinds of animals like dogs, cats, tigers, lions. So, each of these class has specific attributes or features. So, you have to use that to determine a predefined class, like for a dog face is different from for a cat, right. Similarly, for a lion and for a tiger face is also a different kind of stripes are used. So, you can easily use this kind of attributes to separate them out. In material science also, each alloy can have different attributes. Chemistry, composition is one of the important attributes, right, that can be used to define a class. Like we call as nickel based superalloy, we call steels. Why? Nickel based superalloy is basically nickel based alloy which is large number of elements. Steels are basically iron based alloys. So that's it's an attribute which can be used for a predetermined predefined class. Steel is a predefined class, nickel based superalloy is a predefined class, and we can use chemistry as attribute to define that. So then what happened? So once you have done that, this set of instances or examples or samples can be used for any kind of model construction, whether you are going to use regression, we are going to use SVM, or whether you are going to use DT, that can be used to do that. And this construction, then after doing it, one is to do a training, and then only model will be useful for applications. And further, that is the step 1, model construction. But step 2 is the model use. So therefore you have an unknown object, unknown chemistry, let us say you have an unknown alloy which contain titanium, molybdenum, vanadium. Can I label it steel or superalloy, or can I label it something else? That is what is called model usage, that is the classifying objects. And then when you talk about model use, you are going to talk about accuracy, and also test set is whether independent of training set or not, all those kinds of things. So those we are not discussing now. Right now we are talking about how to construct a model, and that is what is done. You have to have a data to construct a model. This is one simple example I have shown you earlier also, how to use data or training data to construct a model, and then once a model is done, how to predict it, right, that is what it is. Furthermore, we discussed about some linear classifiers, that is why we talked about support vector machine or SVM. So in a nutshell, SVM is what? You have data, one is positive, other is negative, that is the easiest to differentiate. So here you see the black dots are defined as a +1, and these bubbles which has white regions are defined as a -1. So now how can you classify this data? How can I draw a line to separate them out? Can I do it? Answer is no actually. You can have hundreds of lines you can draw to separate them out, but which is the unique line? That is the question you have to ask. You can draw this line, you can draw even this line, and you can draw hundreds of lines. The question becomes important in the last lecture is that what is the best line to differentiate these two data sets? One is positive, one is negative. You must be thinking what is positive, negative. Let us say you are doing a heat driven experiments. Experiments are successful are positive, experiment is a failure as negative, and I am developing a machine learning model. Then I want to predict if I do experiment like this way whether it will be successful or failure. That is my objective. So in that, obviously successful experiments have certain kind of attributes, failure experiment also certain kind of attributes. So now how do I make a classification of these two, failed experiments versus successful experiments, so that my prediction capability is almost 99.99%. That is the question I am asking. How do I do it? Basically you do it by using what a concept as a margin. What is margin? Let us go back to the board. I think I have explained to you, let me tell you about that. Margin is nothing but the street. Okay, so you can see here you have positive data points, negative data points. So you see there that what I have done is basically a street with two gutters, one is on the positive side, one is on the negative sides, and there is a center line. Okay, this is just like a typical road you travel on the when you are moving on a car or bike or something, right. So now all the negative points should be falling below this line, okay, this center line. All the positive point is falling above this center line. How do I determine that this road which is differentiating this into is as wide as possible? That is what should be doing, right. If it is as wide as possible, you can easily separate out differently. Like I have an unknown here, this unknown is very likely to be a negative one because this is below this, right. How do I know this unknown exactly will be negative one or positive one? That is the algorithm we are trying to develop. So what do you do? Very simple. We draw a vector perpendicular to this center line. Okay, this is a W, right? And then let's see there is an unknown. I draw this vector like this. Correct? Very simple. Now, if I want to determine this whether this unknown is lying negative or positive, what I do? I just project this vector onto W because W is perpendicular to this center line, right? And once I do that, depending on the length of this vector, it might be here like this, or it might be like this. If it is crossing this central line, this must be positive. If it is not crossing the central line, if it is like this, then it is negative. That is the logic used here. Remember Vapnik, he discovered this technique in 1970s. Could only possible, he could only do successful of this in 1990s when he immigrated to US and he came in contact with the Bell Lab scientists. Okay. So, how it is done? Very simple. The technique I told you, we have to make this W as wide as possible. So, how to determine this W? Width, because that is what is to be maximized, right. So, you understood that the width has to be maximized, because then only this vector wherever I draw, I can determine whether it is falling below the central line, above the central line. That is as simple as that. Okay. Very elegant, classification problem, and that is why this is widely used in every sector of machine learning, whether it is a material science, computer science, or even any biological science. This is very classical technique used in AI/ML routes. So, what I do, let us take, I have a minus point here, this is minus obviously, that is why it is behind this gutter line on this left side, and the right side I have a plus point. I draw two vectors, one here, one there, right. So, now this vector which is joining these two is what is talking about the width of this thing, right. That is what it is, because if I take a triangle, vector triangle, this is one vector, this is another, this is one. So, summation of these two vectors must be equal to this. That is very simple, and the way I have drawn the arrows, that also tells you the same thing. Now, the question is this, what I do is not like that, I draw a unit vector which is parallel to this W. Okay, let me draw the W also here for your purpose. So, this is the W. Okay, I draw unit vector parallel to this W. Okay, I hope it is coming okay, or let me do it in a better way so that you can actually find it out much easily. So, yeah, fine. So, that is my unit vector, and that is perpendicular to W by the central line. So, now I draw this unit vector. Now, I project this vector onto this, that should be my width, right, because this vector is perpendicular to W. Anything perpendicular, anything you draw perpendicular, that will tell you the actual length of the line, right. So, then W is width is what? Width is basically x plus minus x minus. So, now I can do this very simple, because I have done a unit vector. This distance I can project it onto this unit vector, this distance, right, x minus x, this is the distance equal to x plus minus x minus, right. So, that distance I project into this unit vector, then it's become W divided by the value of this vector, right, that is the unit vector. So, what happened? As you clearly see, if you do the mathematics properly, which I have done in the last class, go back, and this x plus and x minus can be termed in terms of B. Okay, B was bias, right, and therefore, that is B, this will be equal to 1 minus B, this will be equal to 1 plus B. So, that will be then, that is why it will become 2 by W. So, what I need to do then? I need to maximize this W, because that is what is my job is. I want to make this street as wide as possible. So, if I want to maximize this W, I have to maximize this 1 by W. 2 has no meaning, right, that is not a variable. So, what does that mean? That means I have to minimize this 1/2 of W square. You must be thinking, sir, why you do change 1 by W to W? This is basically mathematical convenience, because if I have any function which is inverse of that variable, it is very difficult to do maximization. So, instead of that, I change it to half of W square. But why do I change it? You can go back to mathematics books and study that also, find it out. If you cannot do that, you can write me, I can send you what is the answer. So, now the question is this is thing I have to minimize, right. So, that means it is a problem of finding extremum, minimum value of this function, and this minimum value has to be found out under certain constraint. Remember this one, this is called a constrained extremum condition. This mathematical technique you should learn, that is done by Lagrange multipliers, correct. So, what I have done, this is the Lagrange multiplier, this is my function, and then added the constraint, and its constraint, this one A, is basically known as the Lagrange multiplier. This technique was developed by Lagrange. Okay, I hope you know who is Lagrange. He is from France, and he was the doctoral thesis committee member of Fourier. Okay, Fourier, the guy who discovered heat transport equation. So, that is what it is. Then Tn is nothing but target values. Okay. Remember, in a I have a function x which can go 1 to n, right. Then I have a target, so xi ti, which can basically values of this correspond to this, right. That is what it is. So, for x1 the value of t1 is the value of variable, for x2 value is t2, for x3 value is t3, xn value is tn. That is how it is. Because it is a supervised learning technique, I must have variable as well as the target variable. Target means the output of that, right. So, that is what is tn is, and then this is nothing but this function w dot x plus b then minus 1. So, now if I want to determine the minimum condition of that, I have to take a derivative of w, derivative of L with respect to w, and put it that equal to 0. Okay, remember in the last class I told you. So, if you do that, that mathematics has to be done, and we are not doing because of time constraint, then you will find this is the value of w. Okay. So, therefore, this has to be written in a kernel format. That is what is done in most of the SVM classifiers. Okay. It is already inbuilt in Python and many of the SVM classifiers. So, this is written as a kernel, which was done first time by Vladimir Babnik. Okay. He was the guy who developed this technique. Remember his name, Vladimir Babnik. He discovered this technique. So, once it is done, it is very easy. Okay. Then you can, so these are the two conditions you will find out, and from that you can find out the value of w, what are the things which will allow you to make this street as wide as possible. So, I do not want to go details of this mathematics. If you want, you are interested, is there in the books and you can read also. So, that is the technique which is used, what is known as SVM technique, and you should read about it. This is widely used. See here it is written maximum margin linear classifier, the linear classifier with the maximum margin of the width of this street. Okay. And this is sometimes called LVSM, LSVM, that is the linear the support vector machine, and support vectors are this, the points of the data points which are lying on the edges of this street. Okay. These are all the gutters of the street, these are the points which are lying on the gutters of the street. Okay. These are actually forming the support vectors. Why? Because these points are allowing you to draw these gutters. If these points are not there, you cannot draw these gutters, or you cannot draw these extreme lines on the streets. Okay. So, when a car moves, you will see on the street there will be a lot of symbols are there, so that the car does not go hit and go out of this road, right. It is exactly same thing. These points are actually used as a support vectors, this one, this one, this one, they are actually used as support vector, and that is why it is called a support vector machine. Machine means it is basically machine learning technique. Okay. So, I will not go into those aspects. So, let me go further. So, these slides are already shown in the last lectures, you can get it from these things. Let me go into the new technique which started discussing about it, and what is known as artificial neural network. Remember, artificial neural network is another classification technique. Okay. And this is widely used in the literature. So, why it is widely used in the literature? Very simple, it has lot of advantages. Okay. Many advantages. What are the advantages it has? Because it can actually be used for various kinds of classification problems, various kinds of, okay, not only simple, some of the problems which are difficult or something like that. So, let me find out what I want to discuss. So, this is a technique which is borrowed from biology, let me tell you. Okay. This is a method which is inspired by biological neural networks, remember this, and what it does, it tries to find out the mathematical representation of this information, what is known as a biological neural network, mathematical representative of that, and then it processes that in that way. So, therefore, one needs to know how the human brain works, because we are using the concept of biological network, remember that, and this biological network is something which is neural network is something which is to do with our brain. So, how does the human brain work? Human brain is basically parallel processing system, and it has humongous amount of network of processing elements, and there are reports that human brain contains about 10 million neurons. It looks very simple, but it contains 10 million neurons, and that is the one of the schematic picture of the human brain. So, we process data using this brain and take our decisions, right. Right now I am talking in front of you, that means what? My brain is processing, portion of the brain which is providing me ability to speak and think and speak is basically processing a lot of data. It is a huge amount of data it is processing, taking data from whatever I read, taking data whatever I understood. That is why I am delivering this lecture, right. That is what how the human brain works. So, now the typical neuron is what? Typical neuron, which is the processing elements in brain, it has a dendrite. You see here dendrites are like a tendon, which are things which are coming out from the cell. They are called inputs, they are the input from, they are actually sensors by the way. And then you have a cell body which contains a nucleus, that actually acts as a processor. After it is processed, what it will do? Then it has to have ability to send the output, that is what is done by the axon. So, you see this is the axon which is sending the output, and this is your dendrite which is taking the input, and then inside of this, between these two, what you have a body cell body what is called processor. And then once this output is sent, it has to link the output with other cells or other neurons, that is what is done by synapses. Synapses acts as a link. So, therefore, it is, as I said, it is a parallel processing system, human brain. So, you have many neurons and each of these neurons are connected to each other. So, therefore, once they process the data, its the output is fed to the next neuron, and this next neuron again process the data, send the output to the next neuron. That is how the channel actually is formed, right. So, can I use this concept in developing a machine learning algorithm? That is what is the aspects we are going to discuss in the next part of the lecture. Can I use this concept? Okay. So, what is the concept? Very simple. Human brain uses parallel processing techniques. So, can I use a parallel processing techniques or not? Second, can I have inputs taken by these dendrites, then furthermore processed by the nucleus and sent to the axon to the next cell or next neuron via synapses. So, therefore, what will have? You have many layers, first layer, second layer, third layer, you can have hundreds of layers for parallel processing, right. That is what can be done. So, you have neurons, you have one set of neuron here, then another set of neuron here, another set of neuron here, another set of neuron here, correct, and they are connected by synapses. So, a output of first set of neuron is fed to the second set of neuron, and the output of second set of neuron is fed to the third set of neuron, and finally, it goes to the fourth set of neuron and it provides the output, right. This is the output and these are the inputs. Am I clear? That is the concept which you are trying to use. So, remember these neurons are connected by synapses, correct, like that. You can have cross connection also possible. One is parallel connection, or is cross connection, but let us not discuss about cross connection, that will be very complex for you to understand, but it is possible. Those kind of networks are also used in machine learning algorithms. So, I hope it is clear to you. This is the main concepts on which the whole network or artificial neural network lies on. So, the next part of the lecture we will talk about details about that, how it is used, what are the different mathematical formalisms which can be used. So, I hope basic concepts is clear understood to you, and based on that we will discuss the next class.